So this work today is meant to get us to the ideal point of how we work together with building departments and the building professionals, so that we're compliant and it's happening efficiently with sort of minimal revisions along the way. So I don't know who's starting this off. Al? Oh, and thank you to our building inspector Al Ciraco and assistant building inspector John Winter. Worked really hard to, we've had a sort of a different energy code for a long time from other towns, and when we got the opportunity to adopt the stretch code, we worked with Tony Lasanti a fair amount on understanding, how we can do things more efficiently, and then we landed on the stretch code, which has been a challenge, but also a great thing for our future. So thank you. Chris. Thank you.
All right, hi everybody. My name is Sgroi. Can you hear me okay? It's a relatively small area. I'm a senior project manager at NYSERDA. I have a number of responsibilities over the last 2 years or so. I focused on outreach and support on New York Stretch 2020. We also have Mike DeWein and Matt Evans, who have been supporting me in outreach and technical support to municipalities and practitioners on New York Stretch 2020. They're our circuit riders, they're technical resources to all of you. Skip those slides. So what is New York Stretch 2020? Basically, as you're all familiar, I assume it's a more restrictive local standard. We published it in 2019, late 2019, as an optional stretch code for municipalities, that value efficiency, progress, in the built environment. It was developed by NYSERDA with support from public and private stakeholder groups. We had a residential stakeholder group, working group, and commercial to develop this code. On average, the commercial side is about 7% more efficient than just the state energy code alone. On the residential side, it's about 21% more efficient, again, than the state energy code alone. More restrictive local energy codes are authorized by Article 11 of the New York State Energy Law. So again, this was developed with that in mind. I'll also say, because this has been a point of confusion on occasion for people, New York Stretch 2020 isn't in and of itself a standalone code. It's a supplement to the state energy code. So it's meant to be adopted overlaying the state energy code, which is the Energy Conservation Construction Code of New York State 2020, which is based on the IECC 2018. So again, New York Stretch is meant to help municipalities prepare for future energy codes. This is, I assume many of you have been following closely for a long time. National model codes are developed by the ICC and updated on a 3-year cycle, and for the last several decades now, that national model code, the ICC, has improved in terms of efficiency pretty steadily. I think overall it's been a 1 to 2% improvement, again on a 3-year basis, but over the last decade in particular, that percentage basis has increased significantly. So the New York Stretch, it's meant to be a 1-year stretch roughly, and it's roughly equivalent in terms of overall efficiency to the ICC 2021. It's based on proven known technologies. The intent was to develop a code that could be complied with like off-the-shelf technology. So it incorporates best practices from programs like Energy Star. It doesn't require new, novel or teeth products that would be improved in the market. And it doesn't require building departments to adopt new means of enforcement to use the processes that they're used to. mainly focusing on residential construction today. I wasn't sure exactly, what focus, we should be looking at. But in terms of New York stretch and residential buildings, there are, a number of areas that New York stretch either adds new requirements or amends existing requirements of the state energy code, including the building envelope. So this table basically identifies the areas of prescriptive requirements of the state energy code that are modified by New York stretch. I think most significantly, with respect to fenestration, I'm showing climate zone 4, that's where we are now. I assume most of you are concerned with climate zone 4. So it's a pretty big jump from fenestration U factor, again, prescriptive, from 0.32 to 0.27. This is still a double glazed window. All major manufacturers produce windows with that meet that U factor requirement, but it is a significant jump. You can see there's also been improvements made to mass walls, floors, basements, etc. I will say, in particular in climate zone 4, the wood frame wall U factor, again, this prescriptive table, it really doesn't represent that much of a difference from where the state energy code is right now. New York stretch allows for R21 intermediate framing, which basically means you must insulate your headers and stud corners, specifically to R10 in your headers. The New York State Code requires an R20, and it also does require insulated headers and stud corners. So on its face, because there are continuous insulation options, the R20 plus 5 or the R13 plus 10, on its face it does look like a pretty significant jump, but you have to keep in mind that there is also that option for R21 intermediate framing. I'll also point out this table in the next couple of slides, they're taken from a comparison document that NYSERDA published, and it's linked here on our website. I'll share this slide deck with Mark, and he can distribute to anybody who's interested, but it's a resource that we have available if anybody's interested. Additionally, I'm not going to go through this item by item, but our comparison document, again, which is on our website, kind of itemizes what the differences are between New York stretch and the state energy code, or New York stretch as it amends the state energy code, amends or adds to. So some areas that I'll point out are in New York stretch for new construction, ducts must be within the building thermal envelope. That's an option in the state code that, if pursued, you can avoid duct leakage testing, but in New York stretch it is required. We do view that as a significant change. And again, it only applies to new construction and additions, so this is not a remodel requirement. There are also new requirements for the supply of hot water in New York stretch, as well as ventilation. In general, New York stretch requires the use of an ERV or an HRV, except in climate zone 4. There's an option of just choosing a balanced ventilation approach. I'm not sure if in Bedford, whether or not you do require the use of an ERV or an HRV. Maybe Mark?
I believe we do.
Okay.
For
So,
new.
You kept the HRV,
Okay.
ERV required.
Kept the requirement.
For new.
For new, yeah. So this is a requirement for new construction. One thing I'll point out is many of the requirements in New York stretch will only apply to new buildings and or new buildings and additions. So you know, if you are looking at the stretch code, pay close attention. If it says new buildings, it's only required in new buildings. And again, this has been a point of, has on occasion been a point of confusion.
Chris?
Yeah.
If I may, and this just kind of cements the point that the stretch is an overlay over the base code, so where Bedford requires for new construction, an ERV or an HRV, you still need to look at the base New York State code for what's called efficacy for the ventilation system. So there's a CFM per watt that you have to meet in the base New York State code. So when you choose a ventilation system, you need to look at that table and make sure that the system you're installing meets that efficacy requirement. Not just pick the lowest price unit that the contractor wants to sell you, okay? So just, that's where one of the overlay misconceptions comes in, because, hey, I got an ERV, I'm good. No, you're not good.
Yeah.
You gotta look at the base code too, so.
And, you know, to complicate it, keep it more, make your lives that much more difficult, you also have to review, you also have to size the system based on the residential code of New York State. So, and that's based on the square footage of the house, the number of bedrooms, et cetera. So, you know, I will also mention, I'll mention this as well in later slides, you know, we have resources, 2 of them are right here. I'm going to point out an email and phone number. We're available to answer any questions. We can, anything from just like, what does this mean, to I have this set of plans, or you know, I need help with this on site. Can you help troubleshoot this for me? And we are available. We can walk you through whatever questions you have, whether it's related to New York Stretch as it amends the state energy code, or if you're working in an area that hasn't adopted New York Stretch and you're just looking at the state energy code, we can support you there as well. Some additional differences between the state code and New York Stretch. We do require slightly higher efficacy lighting. On the ERI path, which Bedford requires for new construction, you must hit an ERI 50 relative to 62 in the state code. It's a significant jump. And I'll also speak specifically about EV readiness and solar readiness requirements in New York Stretch, because this has been a point of confusion for some folks as well. These are readiness requirements. So in new construction, you're not required to install EV charging. You're not required to install PV system. But in areas where New York Stretch is adopted, you do have to prepare that new building for the potential down the line for EV charging or a PV system. It's much more cost effective to install the conduit and reserve the panel space now while the building is being built than to retrofit it later. So, you know, obviously New York State is you know, preparing for a cleaner, more electrified future, and this is a way to prepare for that in new buildings that will be here, as the supervisor mentioned, for 50, 70 to 100 years. And so on the EV side, basically what New York Stretch requires, you know, again, very generally, is the conduit and the panel space. Not even the breaker, just enough space in the panel for a 40 amp breaker in the future to accommodate EV charging. Again, new construction. And then on the PV side, it requires compliance with Appendix RA of the state energy code, and basically, again, what this requires is accommodation of roof space for roofs that meet an orientation between 110 and 270 degrees of true north. So if your design includes roof area within that orientation, you would have to maintain, or you have have to allot 600 square feet that could accommodate PV at some point in the future. And then you also have to ensure that you have the conduit and again, the panel space that would accommodate that potential future PV array. But again, it's not requiring the installation, just accommodating a future installation if the building owner wants it at some point in the future. Again, because it's so much more affordable to do that while the building is being built than to retrofit in the future. So I'll talk briefly about costs and savings impact. This is again specific to residential construction. We produced two cost effectiveness analyses for New York Stretch, one on the commercial provisions, another on the residential provisions. Most municipalities that we work with that have adopted have been primarily concerned with residential construction. It represents the majority of permit applications and not only residential construction, but residential construction on existing buildings. So we updated those cost analyses were originally performed in early 2019. I think they were published in July of 2019. All the economic data was from 2018 and prior, I believe. Whatever was most current that was published that we could use to perform that analysis. We updated the residential report in the summer of this year. That report will be published actually this week. The update to that report will be published this week. But the data that I have here is from that report. So we built our residential analysis on two primary models: a single family model, 2,400 square foot, 2-story home. I think it's 3 bedrooms, 8.5-foot ceilings. A multifamily model, 6 units, 1,200 square feet per unit, 8.5-foot ceilings. Just so you understand what the buildings we were looking at. We looked at 4 different heating systems: gas furnace, oil-fired furnace, electric resistance, and heat pumps. We looked at 4 foundation types: slab on grade, a heated basement, an unheated basement, and a crawl space. For climate zone 4, and this is our updated data for a single family home. The total annual energy cost savings is about $330. This is for, again, new construction. Total incremental cost is about $3,000 and a simple payback of just under 9 years. On the multifamily side, relatively simple payback and total incremental cost of about $1,800 and an annual energy savings of $180 or so. The methodology we used is it was developed and published by DOE, PNNL for running these calculations, and I'll include links to our website where these reports are published. You can feel free to review those, look at all of our assumptions, the sources for all the data that we used, etc. I will say this is like state level analysis. What you see in the field is obviously, it's going to differ to some degree. So we're using, state level data for, like policy level analysis here. So again, you may see different numbers in the field, but in general, and what we've seen is that this code or this supplement to the state energy code is cost effective. The relative improvements made in efficiency, the incremental improvements are fairly modest. You can go much further in terms of building efficient buildings than what New York Stretch 2020 represents. And we really see this as an incremental step forward. I'll mention New York Stretch is accommodated in both ComCheck and ResCheck. You have to use the web versions. I know some people are still using the Res and ComCheck downloads, but you have to use ResCheck and ComCheck web, and you can select New York Stretch 2020 as your code if you are planning on, like I said, if you're planning on going that way. I know in Bedford, ERI is required for new construction. Now, I'm going to kind of skip through here because I'm at time, so I'm going to move a little quicker. But I do want to just state briefly, with respect to existing buildings, New York Stretch, again, is a supplement to the state energy code. How existing buildings are regulated by the energy code is dictated by the state energy code, not New York Stretch. So you would consult chapter 5, whether the commercial or the residential chapter, for the requirements for existing buildings. Anywhere that chapter points to the new construction requirements, if they are amended by New York Stretch, then the requirement would apply. But if you're renovating an existing building in a municipality that's adopted New York Stretch, it doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that if you replace a window, you suddenly have to bring your envelope up to new construction requirements dictated in New York Stretch. The requirements are, again, dictated by the state energy code, so just something to keep in mind. And I'm moving pretty quickly here, but also wanted to point out, to date, 42 municipalities have adopted, including the town of Bedford. And again, just briefly, we do have many resources. We have our circuit riders, or technical support folks. We have a hotline. You can either contact that 866 number or email codes@NYSERDA. We'll respond to your questions either same day or next day. And our support runs the gamut. It's really dictated based on whatever your needs are. But we have resources available. We also have energy code training available, including energy code training specific to New York Stretch. For upstate markets, we have 2 commercial courses and 2 residential courses. They are generally webinars. They're available multiple times a month, every month. And you can access those through that link at the bottom of the page. We also have checklists that were developed, which will support the state code as well as New York Stretch. And again, those are available on our website. And then here are just some contact information for myself and our circuit riders, including Matt and Mike. So again, feel free, please contact us if you have questions, whether it's questions about interpretation or application to projects. And we're here to support building department staff, architects, engineers, builders, anybody. So that's the end of my slide. Who am I turning it over to?
Well, Mike or Matt, do you have comments and fill in?
Yep.
Otherwise, we should turn it over to Q&A. I'm sure they'll have a lot of questions.
Matt's gonna cover the ERI for a minute.
Set it behind you, Chris. That's good.
Can everyone hear me without the mic? I speak shop price. I had to talk over table saws, the lathe, which everyone loved. The school made me stop having them allowing them to make baseball bats. Apparently that became a problem. Let's see if I can get my computer up here. Is that on? Oh, it's on, that's on.
Real quick, I wanted to point out, Chris had the ERI up on the screen, it's 50. And the New York Energy Code is 62, 61, depending on your climate zone. But previous code cycle, it was a 51 or a 52, I believe. And it was a 53. And we actually jumped up because there are changes with the software that we use and the logarithms that were being used. So the state actually gave a little flexibility. Actually, the 2018 IECC modified their ERI numbers, which you probably refer to her here as a HERS index still, which there are slight differences between the two. So I did want to note that any builders down here that are, anyone, contractors doing Energy Star by any chance?
Does everybody know what the ERI even is? You might back up a step.
Well, I'll let you do that.
No, I
I'll
just,
save my voice.
there you go. You might just explain what the ERI
Yeah,
is.
the ERI, I'm gonna pull up a file here, is the Energy Rating Index. It's a scoring system. And what it does is it allows a HERS rater like myself to go into a home. We work with the architect, we work with the builder early on, ideally early on. Every now and then I get a phone call, hey, we're starting to build a house. Can you come do a thermal bypass inspection? I'm like, oh, let's take a step back here. But the Energy Rating Index, a HERS rater like myself will go in and we actually inspect the home, take a look at it pre-drywall. And we look for air sealing opportunities. We look at how well the insulation is installed. And we want to give it a grade 1 install. Where other builders might throw some fiberglass in the wall and it's too compressed or it's not filling the cavities. We actually look at that and we have to tell the contractor, this needs to be fixed. You cannot go ahead and drywall until this gets corrected. We want a grade 1 install of insulation. Any insulation can be used when you go Energy Rating Index, but we're there involved early on. And then we go back into the home once it's finished up. We do our blower door testing. I go to each bath fan, I put my black box over it, I measure the airflow. I go to the exhaust hood over the stove, I measure airflow. I check to make sure the heating and cooling systems are operating. I double check that the model numbers and serial numbers match up with the equipment that they said they were going to install in the manual J, manual S reports. We documented it. I average about 150 photos per house. And the good thing about having a home rated through the Energy Rating Index approach is I have a provider and they do quality assurance checks on me, quarterly, yearly. I actually have my quality assurance check next Friday. And they're gonna go in with me to a house that I've rated and verify that everything I documented is accurate. I have to redo the blower door test, I have to redo the duct leakage test. All the model numbers on all the equipment has to match up with what I put into my software. And if I get anything wrong, then I'm in trouble. Years ago, doing a QA check, they discovered that I had the square footage of a window wrong. And this is back when the egress window came out, that requirement. On the plans, they never changed it, the basement slider. They never changed it to an egress. So I did all my modeling on the plans. When I walked through the house, I never caught on that they put in an egress window in the basement. Completely missed it mentally. I was put on a 3-month probation as a HERS rater for getting the square footage of one window wrong. So what I'm getting at is if you choose, in which you are doing the ERI approach, there are HERS raters involved, it's a really good thing because they have to do their job well and to do it properly. Otherwise, they're jeopardizing everything they've worked towards. So real quick, modeling software that we use, this is RenRate. There's Ecotrope and Energy Gauge are the other main ones that are out there. And these softwares are accessed by raters. You can download a generic version of it and try it out if you want. But as a rater, I send this to my provider. They look through the files that I develop and they see if it's good to go, give it the okay, and then I'm allowed to print and send out the documentation. It's all reviewed. But what we're getting at here is the ERI approach Just hit the lightning bolt there and I'll go to codes. And this home right here, this is just a standard Energy Star home, nothing fancy. Its ERI number for the 2018 IACC is a 48. And this builder is not doing anything special. And they've already met the New York stretch requirements. And we can go through and what you do is you model the home and you can put in, starting out with your, my contacts do not allow me to read small print, so I don't want to look at the big TV. Here it is, your utility rates. So we all know utility rates have gone up, right? So you can put in your electric rates for that particular town, city, or village. If you're using natural gas, if you're heating your home with propane, oil, kerosene, even if you choose to heat your house with wood. I have a friend of mine that lives on Long Island, and he heats his house with wood every winter. He doesn't bother with any other source. But we can plug in pricing and get it tied in pretty accurate. We can put in the climate location of where the house will be. Now this is much more reduced versus what you see with ResCheck Web. ResCheck Web lists a number of cities. So what you do here is you just choose the location nearest to where you're building. So let's see what happens when we change our location. Let's see, we're going to want a climate zone 4. So probably White Plains, correct?
Yes.
So that'll, and this is going to impact what's going to happen over here with the HERS index. It's probably going to go up. So real quick, I'm just going to do White Plains. I'll hit the lightning bolt. Oh, went down, even better. So real quick, we just go through the house. We put in the square footage of aisle, blanket insulation in the basement, R15. And guess what? This allows us to go back to 2009 insulation levels. So all of a sudden, what you see in New York Stretch prescriptive approach, we can actually go back to older levels of insulation, and we offset that difference by putting in better performing HVAC systems. For instance, 80% minimum is gas furnace. Builders are putting in 96% AFUE furnaces. Heat pumps. We get into ventilation, HRVs, ERVs, that actually gives you credits. So you build your home, your different insulation levels, you can modify things. Duct leakage, blower door test results. Here's your blower door test. See what happens with that, but it's a really cool software. Here's all your different appliances in the home. You can do 100% LED. A lot of neat things there with it. So during question and answer session, if anyone has questions on the ERI or the software, I can definitely bring that up. But just wanted to let you know, performance path and ERI is a great way to go if prescriptive is holding up somehow, holding you up with the R values and U factors. Just look at the alternative methods that are out there. So I'll turn it over to right here. Oh, Mike, go.
Just a point on that. So the town of Bedford requires the involvement of a rater for new construction, residential new construction, and major new additions and renovations. And Al can point out the specifics on that. So the bottom line is, you got a lot more flexibility, as Matt just described, going with this ERI method, and it enables builders to take advantage of the things that they already do, or designers that do designs, where they like certain details that are more stringent than the base code or the New York stretch code to start with, and offset some other areas that they don't like. Like a lot of builders don't like wrapping homes in exterior insulation. And you can get around that, so to speak, by going to the ERI method, working with a rater who will help you guide your design to optimize your costs, you know, what you already do well or not, etc. So this is a requirement of you know, the town of Bedford's stretch code law that actually works in many ways to your advantage as a builder or a designer to make things work better for you, most cost effectively.
Thanks, Mike. So I'm Mark Chilkey, I'm the Director of Energy for the town of Bedford. And part of today's session was about hearing from the building department and what they're seeing from professionals in town and that are building homes here. I want to turn over or to give an opportunity for Al to speak to a little bit of what he's seeing in the community and what we're experiencing in the building department.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you to all the gentlemen that came down and gave the presentation. Yeah, I mean, the building department, we've had this for a year and a half now, basically that we adopted the stretch code. And I'm finding a lot of similar issues when I get submissions. I have brought in a bunch of paperwork here for everybody to take a look. We do have an affidavit method here. Basically, there's 3 different types of affidavits. There's a standard renovation, which is the majority. Okay, that's just base. If you're doing a basic renovation, you're going to need a standard renovation affidavit. If you're doing a new home, it's a new dwelling affidavit. And all this has to be submitted with your plans. So it is on our website. I have brought in copies for you to take a look. Also, what we've been finding is a lot of things that are missing on the plans. I brought that, the air barrier chart, the actual energy, the 2020 New York stretch energy chart. A lot of people are still putting the 2018 IECC or 2020 tape. So there are things that I did bring a sample plans to show you what we kind of look for on the plans to help us, so you don't get a long revision list from me. But just like any other code, when codes change, it's a curveball. So everybody has to learn and know what to put on the plans. But it has been a year and a half, and to help facilitate and move it forward, I have brought things here and just so we can move forward and I can help push along your plans. That's what I'm here to do. So I've also brought a revision list that shows you a bunch of items that I've sent out to people. The number 1 questions that I have, towards you. So I would also, to elaborate on what Chris said, I mean, I would use it as an example because everybody's confused. Look back in the 2015 IRC, right? What was the 2017 code supplement, right? Well, look at the 2017 code supplement, and that's your stretch code, right? It's a supplement above and the IRC obviously is your 2020 energy code. So that's what it is. It's and I also brought a sample of the res check. That's a big issue that we have. We get a lot of res checks in that are for using the wrong code, the 2018 IACC, and it needs to be collaborative. Right? It has to have both codes. So it has to have the 2020 New York stretch with the 2018 IACC. Okay, so there's certain sections that were not modified, and that's why you need to use. It'd be nice if we had one code, but hopefully that's coming. That we can have one code for everyone. But right now you have to use both. And that's basically it. I'll stand up here and if you have any questions, I'll point out the affidavits and also the items that we do put on the plans. But if it's just also heat calculations and things like that. I brought a more extensive plan here. But that's basically all I have. But
Well, I've got a question for you.
Bill, sure.
So this was meant to be a Q&A, and Al and John and I had a chance to talk yesterday in the past, and one of my questions is, what are the top 3 errors or things that really slow you down in the building department related to the energy code? What are the top 3 components that professionals are missing that would make your job easier and get these plans out quicker?
Well, missing items. Affidavits. We get a 2-page affidavit. It's simple enough. The front page, you put all your information. But the second page, for some reason, no one checks off the reports that are needed. So it doesn't help me. I need to call and speak with them and speak with designer, so that holds us up. Putting down the wrong information, as I stated, on the plans is okay. That's probably the number one, that I'm missing a lot of things on the plans. That's why I brought a sample, I brought you different, charts, so you can get an idea, you can take them with you, and you kind of know that's what's got to be on the plan. Basically, and also, as I stated before, using the wrong rest check, which is you need a 2020 combined with the 2018 ICC.
Do you have a checklist that we take with us? Do you have a checklist?
As far as, I have samples, I have the affidavit, I don't have an actual, I
A
do.
checklist for like what we need to put on plans for?
No, yeah, I do not have
We're
the,
working on it.
we're working on
We're
that.
gonna have that, I
Yeah.
think, because that was a suggestion from our meetings.
Yeah.
So,
We talked
yeah.
about
So if you look at the base energy code, in chapter 105.2, there's 8 bullet points. It says construction documents. Those are the things that have to be on the code. If you want to do a cursory review yourself before you submit it to a plan reviewer, and you use ResCheck Web, you have the building envelope that you model in ResCheck Web. You then go to your compliance and there's a checklist. That checklist has all the mandatory items for systems and for the building envelope. And it points, there's fields that you can fill in the drawing number, right? And so that right there is a big kind of bottleneck. As you're doing a plan review, if the detail isn't there, if it's not on the drawings, you can't check that item off, right? So start there, start 105.2 in the IECC.
Thank you, Tony. This is Tony Sante, he is a HERS rater, so thank you for your help. Another thing I wanted to point out also is, a lot of times we'll get a smaller renovation, and you're just doing it, if you're doing a simple remodel of kitchen, or you're not changing any rooms. People don't realize, New York State Code does have an exception, right? Chapter 5, you look in there, you fill the cavities full, okay? So, not everything has to have a res check. Now, with our code, we do ask for a res check for almost everything. That is part of our code, except if you fall in a situation that you're remodeling an existing habitable space. If you're doing that, then you can fill the cavities full. We ask that you follow the prescriptive method when you put the windows in, 0.27. But other than that, if you're doing an addition, or if you're converting a basement from non-habitable to habitable, we ask that you send in a res check. So a res check is basically in most applications. Yes, sir.
So my difficulty has always been renovation.
Can you use the mic? Sorry, with that going. I can't hear anything.
Yeah.
My difficulty has always been the renovation plus, not a full-blown addition. You just mentioned a kitchen renovation, but a kitchen renovation with adding a slide, or adding a nicer, bigger window with a sink, or closing in that porch or vestibule. Like all that, it's a renovation, but it's a little bit more. It could be a roof dormer. I always find that doing a res check for that, the modeling, very complicated. I don't know how to even make it work. Prescriptive could be very restrictive, because a roof dormer could be next to 2x6 or 2x8 rafters, and then all of a sudden you have the builder's dormer meeting prescriptive code. It doesn't, architecturally and construction, it starts to make no sense. So anyway, how can we make that transition better for an alteration plus, or sort of a percentage of changes in the envelope that will still give you a better way to meet the code, still improve the envelope, but not be so complicated and difficult to get rules on.
In res check, web, there's 4 choices. So it's new construction.
Am I using the mic? Thanks, Tony.
There's new construction. I believe there's alteration. And then I think there's a choice that says it's to the akin of none of the above. Matt, if you're.
I'm gonna pull res check web.
Yeah, so you have to choose the type of work that you're doing. It's not one size fits all. It is aggregated. So you have to choose the one that says like no alteration or no change. and then input your prescriptive values to see if you get compliance. So you almost kind of have to fool the software to get what you want.
All of the software, to make a big addition here, you got 3 walls.
Right.
What do? You make that, where you break open the existing wall, and you fool that, that's how I do it. You
Right,
fool the
so
computer that way.
when you're fooling it, you're basically telling Reg Check that you're not looking at the entire building envelope. You're only looking at the cavities that you touch. And if you just put in prescriptively your R21, theoretically, you should get compliance.
Make an addition to that too. But the other thing you have to remember, for renovation work, and I don't remember, Al, whether you require a res check for everything, but if you're adding a dormer or replacing 2 windows, the only thing that has to comply are those new construction pieces that you are doing. You don't have to bring the whole building into compliance, nor do you have to do a res check if you're just replacing a couple of windows. You require a res.
No, our code does require a check for renovations.
Right.
But
Major.
listen, if someone's just bumping out a corner of a wall, let's go with the prescriptive. If you're doing the windows, we allow you to do that. Sometimes it's beneficial to the design professional to go with a res check, because sometimes you can't meet, you don't wanna meet 0.27, okay, then you add extra insulation or you do something else, and that's how the res check can help you. So it can be advantageous for you to use res check, but that's up to you. I mean, if it's something small, I'm not gonna question it. I mean, if we can do prescriptive, we'll go prescriptive. I mean, we are busy, we have 12 other codes that we have to deal with, so.
If the R value doesn't work, just go UA alternative, I love that. Just do a little bit of math.
Yeah.
And take your air film and your sheathing, and all of a sudden you're in compliance.
Yeah, it's not
Sorry.
that big.
No, I'm on a roll. There was a schedule, which is, great, for lowering it down, all the values, the U values. Interestingly, Anderson's, higher end windows will meet actually 0.26, but there's some products that don't go lower than 0.28.
I think a corner door.
Yeah, it has to do with testing and glazing size and all that stuff. So if you have, so you can treat a renovation or changes as a component, right? You can average them out.
Yeah. You just put it in context, right? So the table 402 that they showed for, for the prescriptive U values and R values, the window, because, Chris had mentioned the biggest leap is going from that 0.32 U factor down to a 0.27, right? It's a matter of perspective. I mean, in our world, a 0.27 window is really nothing special. Yeah, you might have some custom sliders, and some of these houses are bigger. These are not normal houses that you have like that, right? These are special houses, okay? A 0.27 fenestration value is basically an Energy Star label fenestration. So if you look at an Energy Star labeled glass window or door, that's Energy Star labeled for the northern climate, you'll see 0.27 as a threshold for the EPA Energy Star. That's not an uncommon window, right? Most manufacturers have that, with some exceptions, custom stuff, right? As we get into the new world, this sort of passive house world, we're seeing values that are half of that are being produced by mainstream window manufacturers. So 0.27 is not a big scary.
Yeah, I would add to that, in another project, I'm doing a market analysis in the Northeast on windows, because there are several utilities looking at doing window incentive programs. 0.27 is kind of your middle line window in the Northeast market. Energy Star, the next tier of Energy Star is going to 0.22 U value, which is another whole step tighter, and that's going to be the next Energy Star that people are marketing to. Energy Star is a desirable.
I want to acknowledge it's 9:30. We did start late. I think we're all willing to go later. So if there are other questions, we can keep going. But it is 9:30. I'd like to open it up to other folks that have questions. Thank you for yours.
Can I just, I want to mention something too, because I think Chris and Matt mentioned the Energy Star program. Matt, Matt mentioned Energy Star. All right, Energy Star Certified Homes is a federal program that's out there. It requires a HERS rating. It requires certain credentialing for the HVAC contractors. It can get a little bit complicated, but it's a program that's out there. It's been out there for many years, and like codes, it evolves over the years, mainly in relation to codes. Something to keep track of. The Inflation Reduction Act that was just signed into law. There is something in there called a 45L tax credit. It is a $2,500 tax credit for builders for each Energy Star certified home. If you do the DOE Zero Energy Ready Homes program, which if you look at the DOE program and New York stretch code, very similar. Very close in performance. You have to get a much lower HERS index for the DOE program. $5,000 tax credit. Eligible this year. So keep that in mind as you do your planning. You might look at the stretch code as a moonshot, but the reality is there's some incentives to go along with this and go a little further. So,
On top of that, the EPAC tax credit's been out there, and you can retroactively go back and claim $2,000 tax credit. I'm doing that right now. There's a potential apartment complex I'm gonna do that on, that was built 2 years ago. We might go in and get them tax credits per apartment unit, 2,000 each. So right there, that's a good savings. And one builder I do Energy Star Homes with, I'm going through all their old files because they just extended it because the deadlines that happened. They're looking at over $35,000, $36,000 in tax credits for homes they did in recent years, which is not a small amount. So.
One thing I forgot that we do not find on the plans lot is window and door schedules. Okay, I'm going to ask.
That's the easy thing.
Yeah, I know, but I don't see them, but.
You'd think.
Listen, I try to, when we do our reviews, we try to, what people forget is a lot of times you put boilerplate information. Well, your contractor's not always gonna see that, and it doesn't make for a great, thing for your client either. So, that's why we like to see things, like to see the rest check report actually on the plan, preferably with your section detail, so we can see that all the numbers you've come up with basically match what's in your section detail. I've had reverse, like I've had a different report and different R values, and so things slow it up. But anyway, that's all I have. No. Sure.
One of the slides in the first deck referenced passive house alternative. Could you just speak really briefly how the interface between passive house, if you're going that approach, not necessarily certified, but how that interfaces with the different rating systems, or if it does, or if you're just using those to plug into the normal rating systems?
I can just speak to that quickly. I don't know in Bedford specifically what is and isn't allowed. I assume passive house, if you want to take that approach, you're not going to run into any roadblocks in Bedford. But what the stretch code basically requires is that if you do use the passive house approach, you still have to meet the mandatory requirements that are in New York stretch and obviously also in the state energy code. And you also have to demonstrate that the project complies using some other prescriptive method. We recommend ResCheck because it's fairly simple. The reason for that is currently no passive house software is approved or recognized as a code compliance tool by the state of New York. So that alone, even though a passive house building is orders of magnitude more efficient than a code building or even a stretch code building, because that software isn't recognized by the state as a code compliance tool, it's not enough. You also have to show compliance using some other method like ResCheck. And again, if you're building to a passive house level of performance, you're going to come out on top with a ResCheck report, but you have to go through that.
Still go to see.
Yeah.
Well, for a new dwelling though, you need the,
So in the case of Bedford, right, you do have to comply with the ERI path. So you're doing a HERS rating to produce an ERI path. In the New York stretch code, passive houses, there's really two paths. There's the PHI path, which is the international standard, which is one size fits all. So for that program, if you were to design to the international standards and meet all their requirements, do a HERS rating for the ERI, do all your inspections, you would be good to go. The alternative to that is the FIAS standard, which is Passive House Institute US. Those are climate-specific standards that are cost-optimized for the US climate zones. FIAS requires, for their certification program, they require a HERS rating. Well, Bedford requires a HERS rating, so you need to do that anyway. FIAS also requires Energy Star certification, Indoor Air Plus certification, and DOE Zero Energy Ready Home certification. So if you do the FIAS option in Bedford, not only are you going to be eligible for NYSERDA incentives, you'll have the HERS rating baked in, and you'll be eligible for the 45L tax credits. So I'm biased, I'm a staff member at FIAS, but the fact is, that's a very attractive approach monetarily for folks in Bedford. So.
Just another thing I might point out, most of what you see with the New York stretch that Bedford has adopted is very forward-thinking, but coming down the pipe very soon in the soon-to-be adopted or completed 2024 International Energy Code, the Department of State, we think, is going to be looking at it and modifying it as with all the rest of the building codes, starting this fall when those codes are complete. I'm on the ECC Commercial Envelope Committee and also monitor the Residential Envelope Committees specifically, and all of those changes are just about complete. And most of what is in the New York stretch, it's not based on the New York stretch, it's not word for word, but most of what you see in the New York stretch now will be exceeded by this new code in another year or two. So, in effect, you're preparing the market here in the town of Bedford and the area, as are all the other towns that have adopted in Westchester County, to go there anyhow. And then you'll hopefully see another New York stretch, right, Chris?
That's where I was going with this. I wanted to emphasize that, you know, we're passing these regulations to really just looking ahead that what's coming is going to be more restrictive, and you already have to jump on that. So we've got about 5 minutes left. Are there any other pressing questions? I know that a lot of people do renovations in the workroom. And we talked a lot about, you know, big, old, brand new buildings. Are there any renovation questions? I think that's where you are finding much of the delay because they're not, because
Majority of the work is going to be renovations, but that's what I kind of laid out before, giving you an overview, and that's what I can show you here after this is over, just to go over some things.
Yeah, the Bedford affidavit has great direction for you if you're a designer or a builder to
On
make
3
sure
pages.
you get the documentation.
not just the first page.
Yeah.
Second stage.
Well, and we're adding an actual documentation checklist to it as we speak. When I get back to the office.
Not really a question, just for the practitioners out there, and for Alan, John, and Mark. When New York Stretch was rolled out, all of us practitioners were promised a published copy of the New York Stretch Code integrated with the New York State Energy Code. That never happened. That doesn't make life easier for any of us, right, including the building department and the professionals out there that have to design it. So voice your opinion to the Department of State. Not so much NYSERDA. I think NYSERDA has really been behind trying to push for that. So, you know, don't shoot the messenger. But I would, you know, talk to the Department of State and say, hey, listen, you want us to use this code, make it easy, put it in one place.
I just wanted to point out, one location where you can look at the New York Stretch Energy Code with the New York Energy Code is the UpCodes website. It's a resource. Don't take it word for word, but they do have a whole separate listing for New York Stretch in there now, which does break it all down. But don't
cite from it and quote it or anything, but it's a good reference starting point. So upcodes, if anyone's not familiar with that, just go to Google, type in upcodes, select New York State, you'll find it at the bottom of the page.
Great. Well, if there are no more, do you have a question about it? Yeah. Bob Fishin's our town energy coach.
Thanks, Mark. So Alan, and we've corresponded a little bit on this. It might be helpful to hear what actually triggers here in Bedford specifically an energy, when somebody's doing an energy upgrade in their home, heat pump systems, insulation, things like that, where this code adoption comes into effect, and also if it's not required to pull a permit, for example, for that, how would it help to document those improvements for future upgrades to a home? If, an architect is getting involved at a later date.
Well, I mean, if someone's adding insulation to their attic, I mean, we don't ask for permits for that. I mean, that's an upgrade. But of course, you want to have pictures and have things for your future to show somebody, especially if you're going to close something up. Or now, with that said, if you remove covering here in Bedford, we ask for a building permit whenever you're going to remove any exterior finishes, which we're talking about sheetrock, and if you're going to remove the insulation, we do ask for a permit. Now, with that said, the education law states that you don't need a plan, okay, stamped by a design professional, $20,000 or less, except if there's structural, then that's all, then we need it. But when it comes to something you're doing in kitchen renovation, that's fine. Yeah, we're gonna ask for a building permit if you remove the exterior finishes. But if you're only doing like a cabinet, you're basically just replacing your kitchen cabinets and you're doing your plumbing and electrical, then we're gonna ask for a plumbing and electrical. And if you change and do something different, we'll see it when we're there doing the plumbing inspections. But yeah, I mean, that's basically what we do. I mean, the exterior walls, that will trigger a permit.
There are
Not necessarily plans.
We'll try and record something that's not part of a permit, not conditioned space, and you're thinking down the line, maybe one day, this is gonna be a condition, I'd like to condition the space, we will put in our inspections, that, this is the R value that was put in these walls, sheetrock and say basically it's not gonna be conditioned. Of course, I can't guarantee that's gonna work 5 years from now either, but we will put in our inspection reports that you've actually insulated these walls to this. We do similar things with roughing for a bathroom downstairs you don't wanna put in, it's under a slab. We'll actually put in our results that, the under slab plumbing passed an inspection to try and help you down the road. And we run into situations where actually 10 years later, people went to do something and it's like, sorry, these walls don't work. I mean, that happens, but we will try and put documentation in, even if it wasn't part of the permit. I just did it recently. The garage was being fully, I just recorded what it was. It was really relevant to the job, the exterior walls in the garage, but just in case somebody wanted to do something in the future, it was listed there.
And with respect to HVAC improvements, if somebody wanted to put in central air with a heat pump system of some sort of geo or air source.
We should get a building permit. If it's just a split unit obviously, it's gonna get an electric permit. You're not running any ductwork.
But does that also trigger ventilation requirements, ERVs and that sort of thing in Bedford?
Typically, no.
Sorry, Bill Spade, along those lines, I would think that the distinction,
what requires a building permit doesn't necessarily trigger the energy code requirements, right? So I would think we're talking about you have to meet an alteration level 1 to trigger the energy code requirement. So if you're changing finishes, you're adding components and you haven't gotten to the level of an alteration level 1, you're not triggering the energy code requirement, I would presume, right?
end up with depending where it went.
Right.
You need a leak test. Sometimes I have to run into it in the middle of a project we didn't realize. And all of a sudden I got stuck working in unconditioned space under an alteration.
Right.
Hey, now I need a leak test. Hey, now I need to make sure you're insulating at the right values. And things like that happen in the field.
So that's actually was the question I was gonna ask. So if we're doing an addition to a home and a part of it and replacing the HVAC system that covers other portions of the home, does that HVAC system get brought into the energy code requirement along with the addition?
Yes.
Even though it might be located.
They actually have some like clarification letters on how to do a leak test on something that, I think sometimes it was impossible, and the state acknowledged it because of the way the system's tied together. Other times like this could be separated and this should be leak tested. And they got, like tech bulletins will give you some clarifications on when to do or when not to do.
Okay.
Even on blower door tests, thermally isolated or not, they had, an addition that was, this room was getting an addition that was got the same roof. It's not practical.
Yeah.
To do a blower door test on this room with the addition now, and the state's magic, it actually comes from the codes exemptions, but they've actually put clarification letters out there, so I can come in and tell you, oh, by the way, you're building a 2,000 square foot wall, so we can blow door test over there.
Right.
Now, we're not gonna do that.
Right, okay,
And the
A
blower
lot of
door,
times you gotta talk with us, or,
okay.
to try and work that out.
if it can be done, you also see that I've had situations that you have a blower door test, that they do a small addition and they have a wall and they're able to put something over the openings and they were
Yeah,
able to
simple
do
to
it. It's
do,
the
yeah.
work area, right?
Right.
It's not the entire home.
Right.
It's the work area.
Right.
So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, well, we are at time, but I wanted to say, any last words from our guests? If not, we can,
I would just, it's an honor for me to be here. It's great what Bedford and Bedford 2030's done, I think, and I ain't blowing any smoke here with Al and John. These guys do a great job. You're lucky to be working with them and not many of the other 3,000 code officials I work with around New York State. These folks really do work well with you and have their systems together. So I encourage you to give them all the support you can. Make sure your documentation is there. It makes everything go more